Hello. Let's talk about one of the hottest topics that we have in the tech world right now, the state of AI. So we recently published a research report at Datadog, highlighting some of the trends that we see in the world of AI engineering. Yeah, let's talk about that.
Excellent. Yeah. So this is something that Ryan, Div, myself, and a bunch of other people have, been involved with here for a while now. And it's taken a whole team of people to go back and look at some of the data from like over 1,000 different customers and put it all together into something that we would share out with everybody. That would be a little helpful for us to go through it a little bit just now. There's lots of other content we'll be working on to kind of get the word out about this, but in general, yeah, let's take a look at the state of AI engineering report. So we had like 7 questions or 7 facts, I guess you could say. We kind of set out to answer. We started off usually with a hypothesis about what it is we were setting out to understand, and some of it has to do with just the data that we have available to us, from usage and that kind of thing. But this first fact here, the organizations are increasingly relying on multiple models. You know, when we started looking at the data, obviously people are going to want to know about OpenAI and Anthropic and Google. They're kind of up there in the big ones, but there's so many different LLMs and different providers out there now. This was kind of a challenge to really, I guess, show what the industry's maybe trying to do out there. Either one of you got any thoughts on this first fact?
I'll let Dave talk about the others because I think there are probably quite a few there, but I find it very interesting how much market share OpenAI lost during this period of time. And it feels bad to say it that way because it's a percentage of the whole, and it might not be that they lost that much. I think another way to put this would be how quickly Anthropic and Google caught up essentially during this period or became popular, released models that were quite popular. And I think it's making for a more healthy market. It means that there's more choice for developers when they're going to pick a model that they're going to use or incorporate as part of a service. So I think it's great for the industry.
Yeah. Div, what do you think?
Definitely. Definitely. No, I think OpenAI being sort of that one big player last year, definitely enjoyed that big share of the market. And then now we see this year Anthropic and Google have really picked up. And even though we saw like the total number of organizations using OpenAI that use Datadog grew, like I think doubled in this past year, but it still lost share. So that's how quickly Anthropic and Google has been growing. We also want to look at custom and like the other model providers that we have. So at least the word in the market is that more more customers, more organizations are using open source model and some of these other models outside of the major providers. So excited to see in the next few months how that pans out.
Yeah, and I think another part of that too, we see here in this next graphic is because there's so many different models and they're very good at certain use cases, and now we've all got different frameworks and really, trying different things that people are starting to find that they're using more models, and now most organizations are now what they would call multi-model. So I think that's pointing to the direction that people are starting to realize that especially when it comes down to the cost, tokenomics is a real thing, and just understanding what the different LLMs cost and using them in the right situations makes a difference. So, yeah, so let's move on to maybe to fact 2 here. LLM tech debt compounds as teams quickly adopt new releases while keeping old defaults. So it says here, as organizations move into multi-model environments, they also inherit the complexity of maintaining them. Um, when I first looked at this image here, when you, especially if you take like 100-foot step backwards from it, it's pretty clear all those lines are starting to converge together. And we didn't really see this data, like this until much later in the process of putting together this report. So this one has been really standing out to me, I think, more than some of the others. Ryan, what's your take on this?
I think the main thing for me is that I was really surprised that GPT 4 or not 4.0, 4.0, sorry, stayed around for so long. I think there was actually demand to bring it back at one point in time as well. And to me, it just tells me that some tools are definitely better at some jobs, and maybe companies or teams are a little bit reticent to let go of the tools that they know work, while at the same time trying newer models to see if they can take maybe some of that job or maybe some of that job in some other one. So, for example, if we're thinking about multimodal as opposed to just multi-model, so if you're doing vision and speech to text or something like that at the same time, it could be that the other models that are coming out that are more specialized in one mode or another might not serve you the same way as something like 4.0 would do. So like a more general purpose model, and it feels like those ones that are more general purpose are staying around longer than we expected. So it's not just a new model comes out and is better, has more context and is faster, but also if accuracy or mode is more important to your company or your workflow, it could be that those seem to stay around longer.
Yeah, sorry. So Div, I was going to say, if you look at that chart there, it ends in March, and so we're into May now, and we'll have to go back and look at the numbers again. But I'm very curious to see, what this is going to look like, and I think it's going to be something we'll have to take a closer look at again in the future here. I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that too.
No, yeah, I think definitely I was also super surprised to see how 4.0 has still maintained the lead. It is still the number one used model if you look at the percentage of organizations that are using it. So, to my surprise, it hasn't still lost that number one position, which seems, yeah, like there's so many newer models that have come out. And Ryan, as you were saying, there's also been demand for it. So I think at some point OpenAI said that they wanted to deprecate it, and there was a request to get it back. So yeah, excited to see how some of the newer models perform in the coming months, and if in the end 4.0 loses its first place.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's move on to the next fact here. So, at fact three, as agent framework adoption doubles, the need for deep telemetry also rises. I think for those of us here at Datadog, this is preaching from the from the top of every mountain. Is All of this stuff is super super important when it comes to telemetry and just creating a better understanding of what's going on, especially as we adopt these frameworks that now are using multiple models and have lots of different use cases and different costs. I don't know, Ryan, if you've got any thoughts here on it, on the fact that it's doubled. Is that gonna are we gonna keep seeing that over the next years? Is it sustainable, or is that just for this point in time?
Right. It feels like it could double again this year in terms of frameworks. Everyone's trying to come up with a new framework or agent development kit or some type of SDK for models. Listen, it feels a little bit self-serving to say that you need telemetry when going towards a workflow that's more complex. But I think the fact is that it becomes more difficult to monitor multi non-deterministic workflows at the same time, especially if they're chained together. So I think Div and I talked about things like sub-agent workflows, and I think Jason, we've also talked about tracing complications. But when you're doing things like calling out an agent that may also have tool calls and different contexts, it's actually pretty key to start tracing what's happening at each of these steps, especially once you start adding things in like temperature or different contexts for each of the models. It becomes complicated very quickly. And it's not to say you need Datadog for this, but you definitely need something, even if it's just logging and tracing, to look at what's happening between those handoffs. So if one agent's handing context to another, you'd want to know what's in that context and if the tool call failed or succeeded for the subagent.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Well, let's move on to our next fact here. Organizations are building heavily scaffolded agents with large system prompts, but prompt caching is underutilizing. I just the term prompt caching, I feel is still pretty new to a lot of folks. So I think of those going through this report and trying to understand where they are in the industry amongst their peers. Prompt caching is one thing that you should do a little temperature check inside your team and understand if if there's a discussion going on around this stuff. So anyway, this one here says system instructions make up the majority of LLM input. And so, yeah, I don't know, Ryan, can you make any sense of this? Am I on the right thing here? People just not haven't thought about caching their prompts yet?
Yeah, I would say it might be on both ends. So sometimes it could be the users not caching what they're sending or not using a framework like RTK or what have you to make sure that the tokens that they're getting from tool calls are minimized as well. But I think some of it is on the provider side, and that not all providers provide cache responses. So it might be that the capability simply doesn't exist from the provider. And it might also be that it's not the model that you're talking to. It might be the provider itself. Sorry to make that distinction, but you could get a sonnet, for example, from Bedrock or maybe from Open Router or what have you, as well as from Anthropic. But I think what we're finding out is that same sonnet that you're getting is the same model, but the way it's provided to you might be different. So it may be faster and have better caching from Amazon, or it may be that Open Router, for example, gives you more endpoints to talk to. So it's just, I think the main thing is that the providers are different, but also the clients are different at the same time. And just because you're not doing caching on your end doesn't necessarily mean that is like your fault. It could be for sure, but also it could be the model provider itself not caching. The combination of those two, I think, is where the costs are really decreased. And we've yet to see a big push on the provider side for caching. We've seen a couple for sure that are definitely using it, but I'd also say on the client side, it's like both need to participate here. So it could be that you need to start caching your full prompt that goes out or looking at your system prompt and caching that. But I think at the main point is where the yeah, sorry, the conclusion here is that we're basically sending the same text over and over on a regular basis and paying for it. At the same time, the providers are doing the same thing. So they may be sending you back the same tokens, but not necessarily caching those tokens that they're sending back for you. As a result, you're paying more.
Yeah, that's a good point. That not all the tools have really caught up to that as even being like a just a a standard default feature or piece of functionality. We've been talking about Hermes agent here lately, and I'm pretty sure that that's built into that, or at least that's part of what I read, is to try to cache those prompts. You need to deliberately go in and then change them, otherwise they're just gonna use the same ones to try to save on that token usage. So, yeah, I think that one's another one that was kind of interesting. That people should have start having those discussions internally about, does our tools allow for this? Is this something we're paying attention to?
Also, one other thing on that fact is, as I was looking at the data, I noticed that for a lot of the organizations, some organizations do really cache well. So, like when I was just doing some quality checks and going deep diving into the data, I think some organizations have adopted this, and you see a higher percentage of their tokens coming from cached context, whereas some organizations still not. And specifically looking at the 28% number, I think there's definitely room for improvement because we only look at the models that have some kind of caching in the spans in the data. So the 100% is all the models that have a cache, and only 28% of those are cached. I think there's definitely a very big room for customers for this cost saving opportunity.
Yeah, no, that's a great call out. All right, so now moving on here to fact 5. The context window size has exploded, creating a large potential for context engineering. Context engineering, of course, I think has been a very popular term that's caught on here in the early part of this year, I guess. Context engineering, prompt engineering, all that kind of stuff. And I think, again, kind of speaking to some of the previous facts, is that we're understanding that context isn't just king; it's also related to a lot of other things, and cost, just being one of them. But some of the token usage here has really grown. And I don't know, Ryan, you'll have to remind me, like, when we were going through this, again, this is only through March. So, like, I kind of expect it to be, who knows? I don't even want to comment actually on what it could be next, because I just know I'm going to be wrong. But um, do you remember when we were going through this, like, what the discussion was on how to properly make sense of this one?
Yeah, I think some of it was like the discussion around the context windows themselves from providers. So I think that's the main point that we pull up in the beginning. The other is the client's appetite for more tokens or what they're sending with the tokens. That's a little bit harder for us to laser in on in terms of focus. But the assumption is from my end, and Div, correct me if I'm wrong here, but the assumption is on my end that perhaps around late last year is sort of when MCP servers and skills start to really take hold. I think skills maybe more January this year, and then the MCP maybe more around November last year. But at least in my personal usage, I noticed that the appetite for tokens increased quite a bit. The other corollary here is that just because they're doubling, we're finding that not everyone's getting the full utilization, we'll say, of those, that like that last 50%, 40%, or 30% of those tokens. And it could be that they're actually starting new sessions more often, which further muddies this. So it's going to be interesting to see what this update is, because it feels like behavior is changing as a result of us having longer tokens, longer windows, which means that people are compacting, and some vendors compact really well, whereas others don't compact in the same way. So it might be the new session's better. All this to say that I think it's primarily tool use. I could be wrong, but I really do think that this year things are going to be different in a different way because of the way people are using models as a result.
Excellent. Dev, you got anything you want to add to that?
No, yeah, definitely agree with everything that you guys just said. Just adding one more thing that as we saw, some models are now providing a context window of like 2 million tokens, but our median organization usage was like 5,000. So there's like a big room. There's a lot of there's a lot of room to for additional tokens depending on usage and stuff. So yeah, I think there's a long way to go.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, I think I'll just wrap it up there. We don't want to give away too much of the information that's in the report. We'd love for you to go check it out. We spent a lot of time putting it together, and just wanted to give you a little taste of some of the interesting things that we found. And thank you so much, Dev, for joining us and sharing a little bit of your perspective. You've been involved, along the whole way. Very, helpful with gathering the data and making sense of it. So, thank you for all of that. And Ryan, thank you for being a part of it too and helping us make sense of what the data was telling us too. So uh, thank you both, and we'll see you on another one.
This
Thank
was
you
fun.
for
Thanks,
having me.
folks.
Bye.